in the beginning, God was lonely. And he made the same mistake as a lot of men who live alone. He decided to go out and meet people. Only there weren't any people, so he had to create some. So God created a couple human beings, and he built them a garden with a petting zoo, and he named his new human friends Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve spent their days running around naked, playing frisbee. They ate a lot of fruit. It was sort of like living at a Grateful Dead concert. And God's one rule was that they couldn't eat the fruit from these magical trees he planted in the middle of the garden. But then all Adam and Eve could think about was how great that fruit must be if God didn't want to share. So they gave in and they tried the forbidden fruit. And it wasn't that great, actually. It mostly just made them uptight about nudity. They couldn't really see what the big deal was, but then when God found out about the missing fruit, he went apeshit. He was all like, that was my fruit, I trusted you, you were my life companions, blah, blah, blah. And so he kicked them out of the garden, and as extra punishment, he ordered them to become parents. And so then God slammed the garden gate shut forever, said, go have your children somewhere else. They'll probably just turn out to be fruit thieves too. And that's the story of original sin.
to the show, everybody. You know, can we just take a second here at the beginning of the program to acknowledge the music once again that we listen to here on the show? I cannot stress enough how much this is not filler, but that the music is really carefully selected by us here at the program to help set the mood and bring us in and out of the discussion for the week. And that song there, Uncle Mountain by the Fire Theft, this is Jeremy Enig's, one of his side projects. Jeremy Enig was the front man for a wonderful band from the Seattle scene called Sunny Day Real Estate. My favorite band from that era. And if you know this band, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, I recommend checking them out. And that song, Uncle Mountain, you know, if there's a guy that as an artist understands both the poison and the elixir of the promise that monotheism offers people, that elation and that frustration of what it means to be a believer, excuse me, what the Benedictine monk David Stendhal-Rost calls these bouncing back between these poles of longing and belonging that characterizes the Christian life. End of that song, Enig says, the lyric goes, "Rhythm of mind, don't want to spend my time being afraid of dying. I really want to do good. But I drown in a world of pity and sorrow. I've been immersed within the light. What was I looking to find? I run alone to the sea." And the last two lines, "I want love if love wants me. I want God if God wants me. But I just can't hold on to what I believe." Enig is a guy, Jeremy Enig is a guy that I relate to in that sense of somebody who's sort of spent some time on one side of the great divide of faith and has found himself back on the other side of it. Religion and faith and spirituality and my relationship to it, for me, is a lot like Oprah Winfrey and her relationship to dieting and her body. I'm on this kind of spiral back and forth. The difference is, in my case, nobody cares or pays attention, of course, and everybody's obsessed with Oprah. But it's this kind of love-hate relationship. You know, I was not raised in a religious home. Spirituality and faith and empathy and goodness and our higher selves were not taught in my home. But it was something that became very important to me later in life, especially as I became a young father. Painfully aware of how none of those things had been passed on to me. I went to the church looking for that structure, looking for that direction. And I'm not going to use this intro or this episode to go into my experience as a Christian. We'll save that for a later time, but suffice it to say, you know, this question, this confrontation we all have with the transcendence, that doesn't go away. You know, our good friend Lydia Yuknavitch, friend of the show, author, current Oregon Book Award nominee, talks regularly about how amazed she is that we are stardust, right? That we are bags of liquid and ocean and stars. The very embodiment of the transformation and self-awareness of the universe. If you believe that you pause for a second and fall on your knees in gratitude for how you are the manifestation of consciousness of the 50 trillion genetic geniuses, molecular geniuses that make up a coherent form for you at the moment. If you believe you are a child of God or of the goddess, pause and really reflect on how magnificent it is, and conversely how difficult and terrifying it is to be alive in this universe. We don't get past these things, folks. We don't get over them. We have a guest coming up in a few weeks, Melissa Dodson, who is a death midwife, a death doula. And we all stare down this hallway. And I'm not preaching anything to you that you don't know. That goes for a while and then it stops. And what it was before and what it becomes is this great existential mystery that we all have answered in one way or another, even if that answer includes not having answered it. But without getting cheesy with you, you know, when I sit with my lover, with my wife Celeste, and we're with each other and embrace each other and experience each other's tenderness and closeness, when I look into my children's eyes, when I look into the night sky, when I Something simple. Last night we went and ate this Indian food from a cart near here, a food cart that is. When you eat the food from these people, it's alchemy. What they do with the food that they make, it's some of the best flavors you'll ever have in your life, and it comes out of a little cart from this humble little East Indian couple just up the road from here, and the magnitude of that experience, that you could sit and enjoy that in this place and time, is overwhelming. So what am I getting at? It's easy to argue about if there's a God or if there's not a God. It's easy to get into the political side of things that exist in the world with regard to religion and its exercise of authority over the rights of women's bodies, and its judgment of people along the gender spectrum, and its enforcement of hegemony and of white power over the years. And I'm here and ready and equipped to have all of those conversations about it. But then there's the other side of things, this mystical awareness that when we look in and when we look out, we find an infinite universe of possibilities that are filled equally with mysterious, magnificent, glorious, and terrifyingly unknown things. So, these religions that we've developed over the years, to me as a student and as a professor of them, are, crude as they might be, human technologies. They're algorithms for trying to access and expand this spiritual awareness, this cognition of the transcendence of this abyss from which we emerge and return. And of that, there is no doubt. Some people think one algorithm is better than others. Some people think the other is better than others. You got your Droid people and your iPhone people. But regardless, these technologies are there for the accessing and expansion of consciousness. Our guest for this week is a guy named Mark Russell. Long tangent for me to tell you this. Mark wrote an amazing book, I think, called God is Disappointed in You. And how he explains it is that if he were in a bar having a couple beers with a buddy, and his buddy had not been to church before and didn't know anything about the Bible, how would he explain it to him? And so it's this kind of unpolished, rough, vulgar explanation, book by book, of the Hebrew Christian Bible, the 66 books of the Christian Bible. And many of you, if you're devout people, might be offended by some of the content. We're going to play a few segments in this episode of Mark reading from the book, one on original sin and one on the first Christmas. But I challenge you to look past, the kind of lewd jokes and the vulgarity, and look to the heart of the matter. We use comedy as people in many ways, and sometimes we use comedy to dehumanize, to separate something and devalue it, and to take away its dignity. And other times we can use humor to take away a little bit of the sting of something, to peel back some of the layers of artifice and get right to the heart of something's humanity, and to actually elevate it. And I think that's the kind of humor that Mark uses. When I read his stuff about the Bible, I feel a lot like I do when I read the book Lamb by Christopher Moore. If you haven't read this, I definitely think you should check it out. It's a satiric account of the life of Jesus as told through the eyes of his best friend, Biff. And again, it's lewd and it's absurd and it's ridiculous. And yet, as a person with a master's degree in Christian theology, when I read this book, I sort of fell in love more with the character Jesus than I ever did in all of my theological studies. So, there's a conundrum we're in here. In one sense, this program and my life and the things that matter to me are stepping away from some of the confines of what I look at as the pit that Abrahamic monotheism has put us into in a world, and all of the fallout from that, from patriarchy and from a use of the land that is irresponsible and ultimately not sustainable. On the other hand, this great mystery, this great void, this great thing that exists, that is both within us and that we find ourselves within, I'm still very much interested in exploring what that is and how people navigate that and how they make meaning within that. And one of the ways people make meaning within that is in and through the established religious traditions, right? And so I want to honor that as well with this program and explore it a little bit. Mark is a guy who I think has a foot in both worlds, right? Because I think he still has a real heart for these stories, and I think you'll see that in my conversation with him. And yet, he's using a kind of satiric eye to point out some of the things that frustrate him about the limitations of belief, and how we also can use belief to not expand our notion of our fellow humanity and of our fragility and of our need for one another, but to actually narrow that and use our belief to justify treating each other harshly. So I think it's a profound conversation. He's a funny guy. He's an intelligent guy, and I think you're really going to enjoy Mark and what he has to say on a number of things. And he's also writing a couple of pretty cool comic books at the moment that I think you're going to enjoy. On other show news, and then we will get to things. Had a few emails from folks wondering if our show is back on iTunes. It is, so you should be able to find us there. Let us know if you have any problems with that. And some other questions about when our Amazon affiliate will be up. That should be up this week for you. And let us know how that's working. Again, for the Amazon affiliate, all you need to do when you find it on our site is click on it, go to the Amazon, go to where it takes you, which is the Amazon page, bookmark that, and then whenever you do your shopping at Amazon, go through that bookmark, and then a portion of what you purchase will come to support the podcast. It doesn't raise the price of anything, doesn't cost you anything more. This comes directly from Amazon's pocket. It's a great way to support the podcast because it isn't asking you for any extra money. It's just diverting a little bit of the shopping you would already be doing. Listeners' dedication for this week, John and Tawny Voles. Since we're going to be talking to Mark about God is disappointed in you, I thought John and Tawny would be some good folks to bring up. I've known John and Tawny. We were closer back in the 90s when I went to school with John at Multnomah Bible College. Some of you that are friends of the show and friends and friends of me, friends of mine, I'm an English teacher, folks, know that I have a seminary degree and I was a pastor for a while, and I actually went to and graduated from a fairly conservative Christian Bible college here in the Northwest called Multnomah Bible College. And while I was in college, John Voles was my closest friend, and for quite some time afterwards. And because of that, I still, even though I rarely get to talk to him, I still consider him a dear close friend. John is a funny guy, a talented musician, and someone just with a real flaming passion for humanity. And for music and for art and for creativity and for transformation. And anytime I've ever come across the guy, he is just invested in his community in 600 different ways, and some of them, directly point to his worldview and his belief system and his desire for people to know Jesus and interact with God and with transcendence in that way. And that's fine that he believes that, because he is motivated out of a heart of love and of humility and of service. But even if that's not your cup of tea, so much of what John does is just simply service to community and music programs for kids in schools and free concerts in the park and on and on and on and on it goes with this guy. Just a beautiful human being with a beautiful family that's never done anything but show me love and friendship and respect and appreciation in the time when I was a devout Christian and a struggling weirdo to the time that I became a devout atheist and was a struggling weirdo to the time now when I'm not struggling as much. I don't know what the hell I believe anymore. I know that I'm in love with life, and I am in love with mystery and with beauty, and I'm still a weirdo. And John and Tawny have been close friends, or sometimes distant friends, but always loving and supportive friends. So, and they were there at the beginning of the podcast as well. They're really examples of people that love you because they believe that they're inhabited by a animate and a infinite and an infinitely refreshing kind of love. That is the source of all of us. And so they're beautiful people and they're authentic people, and in many ways They are an inspiration for why this show exists. So this goes out to John and Tawny Voles for all of the ways you've taught me to love and to be a loving person. I appreciate your friendship, and I appreciate you being with the show. All right, people, Mark Russell is coming up momentarily. We hope you enjoy this episode. We got a couple of really fun things for you. In the breaks, you're going to hear Mark telling a story at Backfence PDX, and then a couple of pieces from his God is Disappointed in You book as well. Enjoy the music as well. We got some more planted for you throughout the show. All right, we'll see you on the other side.
Welcome to On the Block with Andrew Gurbich, a podcast about authentic people doing beautiful things. Enjoy the show.
All right, welcome to the show, folks. We're sitting here with Mark Russell. Mark, welcome, man. It's good to see you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
I was telling you when you first got over here a couple things. You're the first person I ever interviewed on the air, live, and so you are responsible for unleashing this beast onto the world.
You lost your virginity to me.
Yeah, exactly. So it's special to have you back on the show now that
I brought a corsage.
Yeah, now that I've become one of the world's foremost voices.
Yes, excellent.
And talk radio. All 17 of our listeners would agree with that, by the way. What have you been up to, man? When last I saw you, you were, we'll get back in. I want to go back to some of the stuff we were just talking about comic books, but we'll get to that. Last I saw you, you had just written God is Disappointed in You.
Yeah, so that's done very well by my humble standards. We're in our third printing right now, and
very cool.
We have written a follow-up book that's coming out in April about the books that didn't make it into the Bible.
Nice.
And it's called Apocryphal Now.
Excellent. Yeah. And when you say we, for our listeners that don't know what this book is, give us an idea of what God is Disappointed in You was about.
Okay, so God is Disappointed in You is basically me rewriting the Bible in a very short, sort of pithy way.
Yeah.
Like every book of the Bible condensed down to like 2 or 3 pages. And there's artwork, cartoons by Shannon Wheeler.
Right.
You may know as the creator of Too Much Coffee Man or from his work in The New Yorker. Mm-hmm. But I like to think of it as the Bible is explained to somebody in a bar.
Yeah.
It's broken down, made very simple, and spoken in everyday language so that anybody can get the complex concepts of the Bible and a lot of the undecipherable language, because the people in ancient Israel didn't bother explaining what was happening in the background. They just assumed they were writing for people who knew,
right?
About the Midianites. Well, everyone knows about the Midianites.
Sure, yeah, those bastards,
those assholes. Yeah. Oh, don't get me started on Edom.
Right.
So you can turn the page and there's a minor prophet just shouting, at people, and in the Bible, it doesn't really give you that context, and you have no reason why he's just suddenly shouting.
I do this all the time when I want to insult somebody. I call him a Philistine, but I still have no idea why that's an insult.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of ironic because the Philistines are pretty cultured.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
They're actually more cultured than the people who are
calling them Philistines,
fighting them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I try to include that context, so it's not a mystery as to why Obadiah is suddenly calling somebody out.
Now, why did you want to do that? Why did you want to make a book doing that? Are you a religious person?
I'm not really, but I grew up in a religious household, and I think I just felt like everything written about the Bible is written from an agenda, like either a religious agenda that wants to convert you, so they're giving you their version of the Bible and hiding the embarrassing parts under the sink, or atheists who are trying to knock the Bible or discredit it by pointing out all the contradictions. What I wanted to do was just give people a book that's like, well, this is what the Bible says, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really great wisdom in the Bible. There's also contradictions.
Some pretty bizarre shit.
Yeah, and there's stuff that really made sense in that time and place in which it was written that's now kind of outmoded.
Yeah.
And that's, that's nothing against them. I mean, to expect shepherds to write things that were scientifically or historically accurate, or that would be morally reflective of times 3,000 years in the future, that puts a lot of pressure on shepherds. They can't. That's a lot of expectations.
Yeah, I mean, and we didn't have things like refrigeration and stuff at the time, and so dietary laws and things it's a very, very different world.
Yeah, and it was a very agrarian-based society, so it was all, everyone was kind of like viewed as cattle. Women were viewed as like breeding stock, and the laws of Moses in the book of Deuteronomy were written to that effect. And, men were considered, basically dicks with wallets. Sort of the guys who were expected to pay for
just
everything.
Like now.
And propagate. So there were all these sort of pre-modern, economic expectations. The Bible is really written, at least the law portion of the Bible is written to allow these sort of agrarian expectations to coexist
there's really fucked up things like the treatment of homosexuals and the treatment of women and the treatment of people who don't worship Yahweh. And but there's also these amazing things like the year of Jubilee and the way credit is handled and the way that generational wealth is handled. And so you don't get this kind of increasing disparity between the uber wealthy and the uber poor. So there's a lot of compassion. True religion is feeding the widow and orphan. I was just talking tonight about how that is said over and over again.
Well, it's a much more common theme in the Old Testament and the New than homosexuality. Which occupies maybe a total of 3 verses in the entire Bible.
Right.
But
90% of my waking thoughts. I just want to say that. Not there's nothing wrong with that. But anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, the Jews were very concerned with building a stable civilization.
Sure.
That's largely what the Word of God was. Well, God wants to do this because this will make our civilization livable, and it will preserve identity so we don't just get swallowed up.
And we're surrounded by these massive civilizations, by the Babylonians, by the Egyptians, by the Assyrians.
And they're always in danger of being assimilated because they made it like the Greeks, the Greeks lived the good life.
Yeah.
So it'd be very easy to like suddenly, start like oiling yourself up and getting tanned and having great sex in the gymnasium with anybody, man or woman, who came by. But the Jews were like, well, we just don't want to get consumed by this alien, albeit attractive culture.
Yeah, this Hellenism. And, actually, not to get too far off subject, but I guess this is the subject. What a lot of people don't really understand is when the Bible was written, when the Old Testament was written, when the Hebrew Bible was written, was mostly during the Babylonian captivity.
Yeah, exactly right.
And so by that point, so this is 586 BC, excuse me, and by that point, 3/4 of Judaism had been assimilated into the Assyrian Empire in 722. So there was the first, when the northern kingdom was taken by the Assyrians up into Assyria to Nineveh and other places and completely assimilated. And so for Jews to fear assimilation or annihilation was not irrational, but that, to see that this is the sort of thrust, excuse me, of their sacred text written after 3/4 of their people had been irrevocably assimilated, it shows that it wasn't an irrational fear at all. They had just gone through it.
No, and I think that's really kind of the common thread of the Old Testament or the Torah. It's not really about the moral code or about the sartorial rules. It's all kind of like, they're all kind of branches on the tree. It's like, we need to remain a people.
A people.
And we cannot be assimilated, and this is how we remain an identifiable people. This is by following these dietary laws.
Yeah.
This is how we know someone's a Jew and not a Greek. By only having sex with these people and not having sex with the prostitutes and the temples. This is how we all identify ourselves and keep ourselves separate. And I think also you mentioned like the year of Jubilee. I think that was also part of like trying to form a stable civilization, because the natural tendency for a civilization is once people get a little capital, get a little land, they have a competitive advantage and they're able to run roughshod over everybody who doesn't have it. Yeah. So they realized that this is, we're going to create a civilization of like plantation owners and slaves unless we, shake it up every now and then and redistribute the wealth.
There's a guy a couple of years ago that wrote a book, excuse me, it was on NPR talking about it, and I believe he was a rabbi, He was a Jewish guy, which to me means rabbi, right? I mean, my people. You're not laughing as much as I thought you would at these
Sorry,
jokes.
I'll give you some pity
Work
laughter.
with me here, man. Come on.
Right.
Yeah, thanks. Some pity laughter. You can't say that out loud.
I'll give you some high wasp laughter.
Right. But the book, right? Thank you. That's all I'm looking for, man. The book was about how, looking at this idea that the Old Testament was written as a kind of warning against the almost inevitable corruption of civilization. That it was written from the standpoint of agrarian shepherd hill people saying, when you go over into this new relationship, this new civilized kind of relationship with one another, be careful that you don't devour one another. You're going to need these rules, because once you go over into, you want a king and you want to be a people and you want to so once you have a king, realize what's going to happen, right? That once you start concentrating power, there's going to be concentrated corruption. And
right. The king will have more in common with the foreign pagan kings than he does with the people that he's ruling.
Absolutely.
So, Solomon was like, well, I'll start bringing in concubines from all over the world. I'll bring in architects to, build my palace.
I love this idea, so Song of Solomon, right, which is interpreted in many Christian traditions as this is the template for biblical marriage, right?
Yeah,
this is the
hot biblical sex.
Yeah, right. And I always go, this is great that a guy that had 1,000 wives is providing the template for what good Christian marriage is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So who is he writing about in the Song of Solomon? Wife 337?
She's not even a wife.
Of course.
The thing that's really kind of tragic about Song of Solomon, if you read it, I think, from a slightly modern perspective, is that this woman is totally head over heels in love with the king, but it's so obvious that she's just some girl in the fields he picked up.
Yeah.
Because for a fling.
So it's like a Bill Clinton scenario.
Yeah, it's like there's this imbalance between to her this is like magical,
like the pickup artist,
and the king is like falling in love with her. It's like every sort of like Disney princess movie ever made. She feels like she's Cinderella, not realizing that the king, and it's in the kind of written between the lines of everything she says, like, oh, he wasn't here around when I woke up, and then the guards in the palace gave me the bum's rush out of the bedroom because he wasn't there, and then I saw him riding by with his 60 guards, and I waved, and he couldn't see me, or he said he's going to introduce me to his mother, but he hasn't yet. And
like an Emma Thompson movie.
If you just read between the lines a little, it's obvious what's happening. And she's just getting used by the king, but in the end, I think her position is that I can't help it because I'm in love, and I'd rather be in love and be used, or be in love and have it end horribly than not be in love at all.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I really think, do you know the book Lamb by Christopher Moore?
Everyone asks me that. I've never read
Fascinating.
it. But everyone recommends it. Everyone says it's really good.
I think you're one of the first people that I know besides him that has taken the material and treated it in this comedic and kind of irreverent way, but that is still trying to treat the material seriously. You know what I mean? So he writes this really kind of irreverent, crazy book about Jesus, and it's from the perspective of Jesus' best friend at the time. Jesus is, how do you vocalize an apostrophe?
I think you got it.
Yeah. It's tough. And it's utter bullshit. And from an Orthodox perspective, it's just totally terrifying. If you're a devout Christian, you probably hate this book. And yet, with a seminary degree, it's one of the only things I've ever read that made me really like Jesus. Like, I liked the character in the book. And it seems biblical in the strangest sort of way. So, for instance, he does funny things like when Biff is having sex, like Biff fucks everything that walks, right? And every once in a while, Jesus will go by the door and just listen. And he doesn't jerk off. He doesn't do it. He just listens to it. And Biff asks him about it. He goes, "Why do you do that?" And he goes, I just want to know what that is. I want to know more about what it is that's like for you, right? And so it's kind of touching, even though it's kind of weird and quirky. And there are these moments where you see the humanity of the man in ways that are really touching, and it's not dismissive. It's almost like a Christopher Guest movie. Like you're laughing at it the whole time, but in a way that makes the characters more endearing. And I really found that going on in your book as well. I don't know if you were trying to go for that, but it's not just satire in terms of, it's not a Bill Maher hit job on the Bible.
No, it's definitely what I did not want to go for. And I don't even really feel it's satirical. I feel like it is irreverent. But for me, irreverence is a species of honesty.
That's interesting.
It's the only way you can really approach something honestly and thus love something for what it is by being willing to be irreverent.
Yeah.
It's like your uncle, you know what's good about him, but you also know he's got a drinking problem and he's a blowhard. But because of that, you can love, because you acknowledge that, you can then love him for who he is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Whereas the love that I think most fundamentalist Christians have for the Bible is like kind of much like the love that people had for Stalin in Russia. It was like, oh no, your leader is perfect at all times, and he's
the great leader.
Yes,
North
dear
Korea
leader is infallible and will lead us. Would never let us down. And I think that's not only is that not really love so much as it's fear. It's I think a species of dishonesty, or it's about keeping something at arm's length. Reverence is inherently about keeping something at arm's length. And I wanted to write a Bible that would allow people, or write a book that would allow people to have sort of more of an intimate approach to the Bible.
It's an interesting point.
Like their drunk uncle.
All right, we're gonna go to break, or we're not gonna go to break. No, let's go ahead and go to break now. I love it. That fell apart. When we come back, I want to pick that up. I love talking about drunk uncles, right? So over the break, we're going to think about all of our drunk uncles. But I want to ask you a few more questions about that. But then I want to get on to this interview has a lot more in store than just God is disappointed in you. That's just what was going on the last time I saw you. So we'll get going from there, find out more about Apocryphal Now, and then find out what's going on with all this DC stuff that you've been doing too.
Great.
Is that cool? All right. Well, folks, we're with Mark Russell, the irreverent, reverent one. You're listening to On the Block Radio. We'll be back right after these words.
I don't care if it rains or freezes, as long as I got my plastic Jesus sitting on the dashboard of my car. He comes in colors, pink and pleasant, glows in the dark 'cause he's iridescent. Take him with you when you travel far.
I was homeschooled, and I went to a bunch of crazy Christian schools, and we had some really, I think, like some questionable curriculum. Our school didn't believe in like evolution or science or accreditation. So I was taught things like that Adam and Eve had a pet dinosaur, or that atheists don't dream at night. So I lived inside this very tightly controlled bubble of awareness of the outside world. Well, we all do, really. It's just that mine was probably a lot smaller than yours. But when I turned 14, my parents sent me to the public high school, which was a big deal. I'd never really been exposed to people outside our little cult before. And I went there. I went to the public high school, and I didn't know anybody, and nobody knew me. So I'd be eating my sandwich alone at lunch. And the Halloween party was coming up. And I thought, oh, well, this could be my big coming out party. This could be my debutante ball. And my parents let me go, which was amazing, because I thought for sure they weren't going to let me go to a Halloween party because it was immoral. By which, of course, they would mean they didn't have it when they were kids. So I thought, this is perfect. I'm gonna make the perfect costume. Everyone's gonna see how funny I am. They're gonna love me, and this will just break the ice, and I'll be the king of high school after this. So I worked on my costume all day long, and my mom helped, and she put me in the green family station wagon and drove me to the high school. And I went inside to the auditorium where, the party was, and I started walking around, started nodding at people, hanging out by the punch bowl, trying to engage people. The people weren't really that interested in me. They weren't coming up and talking to me at all. In fact, they were kind of forming a bubble around me. And everywhere I went, people just sort of spread out and dissipate. It was like I was walking gonorrhea or something. And after a couple of minutes of this, it occurred to me that it was probably because nobody else there was in blackface. I had thought what was the perfect costume. I'd shown up as Buckwheat from Little Rascals. And, I wasn't very convincing as a black person. My skin was really more sort of a diabetic orange than like authentic African American. So I'm walking around, everyone's avoiding me, naturally. And finally, one guy works up the courage to come up to me and he says, "Hey man, that's racist." And I said, "I'm not a racist," which of course is the first thing you say if you're a racist. But then the other people worked up the courage, the other people saw him break the silence, they all started coming up to me and telling me how racist it was. And this was not an enlightened school. This was, a semi-rural high school on the outskirts of Eugene. The most famous people to ever come out of our high school were the Dairy Mart murderers. And if they thought you were gay, they would confiscate your vest. That actually happened. There was a guy I went to school with who he liked to wear a vest like a blackjack dealer to school, and his parents thought that he was gay because of it. So they sought to shut down the source of his gay power by confiscating the vest. So he would have to smuggle it to school in his lunch bag, and he'd strike a blow he was like the Underground Railroad for vests. Turns out they were right though, he was totally gay. But anyways, it was a blue collar, really unenlightened school. And yet I was surrounded by these rednecks who were all coming up and like, "Hey man, do you realize you're dehumanizing an entire race of people?" Like guys in Popeye cat hats just coming up and berating me for being there in blackface. So I got really defensive. And I tried to explain how it wasn't racist, it was an homage to Buckwheat. And so then, sure enough, at this very moment, the one black guy that went to the entire school walks into the door. And they're like, "Let's ask Donald, come here." And at that moment, I just realized, holy shit, I'm a fucking racist. This is just the worst thing ever. And I'm just sitting there in blackface, and I had to leave the party. It was just after that, when I realized what I'd done, I left, and my mom was going to come pick me up in 3 hours. It was an late party. So I just kind of stood out there behind the bushes. Luckily, the blackface worked as a very excellent disguise at night. And I was just sitting there like two pair of white eyes just beaming out into the night, waiting for the green station wagon to come get me. And it occurred to me afterwards that I wasn't really so much racist as I was just unaware of racism. I had lived within my tiny bubble of consciousness so long that it never even occurred to me that how easy it is to sort of trample the humanity of other people. And I think, that in a lot of ways, what's been going on the last few years with the Black Lives Matter versus the All Lives Matter, or the arguments over police violence in this country, are really America arguing with itself as to whether or not about the fact that it's shown up to the party in blackface. And I think that for me, at that moment, I realized that my bubble of reality and awareness of the world around me was much too small to incorporate the common humanity of other people. So my life since then has really been trying to push this bubble out. And I think as a person or as a civilization, you either are working to expand that bubble of our common humanity and your understanding of other people, or you die. And that's pretty much it.
Get yourself a sweet Madonna, dressed in rhinestones, sitting on a pedestal of abalone shell. Going 90, I ain't weary, 'cause I got the Virgin Mary showing me that I won't go to hell.
Hello, my name is Brian Froud, and you're listening to On the Block Radio.
All right, folks, we're back. We're with Mark Russell, and when we left, we were talking about your book, God is Disappointed in You, right?
Yeah.
I love the cover. It's got this like Simpsons vibe of this big hand coming out of the clouds to like flick a person in the back. It's almost like, that was a scene from the book of Job, yeah? That you had rendered?
I don't remember what particular book inspired that graphic.
There's a South Park episode about the book of, it's not really about the book of Job, but I think we've talked about this before, where Cartman inherits like a theme park. He somehow inherits it, right? And then Stan, is that the Jewish kid?
Yeah. Kyle.
Kyle gets like something happens. He gets like a ingrown toenail or a wart or some shit, right? And so he finally figures there's no God. There can't be a God because this satanic bastard friend of mine just inherited a theme park, and I'm trying to be a good guy here, and I get a ingrown toenail or something happens to him. I forgot, but it's like a physical thing. And so his parents freak out. The Jewish parents, that he says he doesn't believe in God anymore, and so they want to try to give him some kind of moral lesson to get him to believe in God. So they decide they're going to tell him about the book of Job. So they come into his room and they go, Kyle, you have to, and the mother, right? And they start, and they just basically retell him the book of Job. There was a man, and he was very faithful, and he followed God's ways, and then, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, right? And then it goes back over to Kyle, and they're like, what do you have to say? And he's like, Jesus Christ, like, what kind of God is it? You know what I mean? It
Right.
terrifies the kid, and he's even more weirded out than he was before, right? Because he's like, what kind of deity acts that way, right? And the parents are at a loss. What was fascinating to me is that you had these parents that wanted to impart this teaching to their child, but they actually reinforced all of the worst parts of it because they were these kinds of literalists, right? They didn't know what made the story compelling.
Right, and I think that's the way a lot of people approach the Bible. They know the stories, but they don't know why they're being told.
Right.
And, Job is a perfect example of that, because on the surface of it is just God being a dick.
He's just a total dick. He's the worst character in the story.
Right, he's like kind of maneuvered by Satan into this by this bet that they have of tormenting Job, his best follower.
Right.
And killing his cattle and his children, and
God's got a gambling
covering
problem.
him with his sores, and doing it just to prove that Job is so deep in his pocket that he'll still worship him despite all this hardship.
Yeah.
But the Rabbi Maimonides has a very different approach to this. He doesn't think it's just God being a dick. In fact, he thinks God is bestowing a very, very great gift upon Job. And Satan's point was like, well, of course Job's worshiping you, when you're constantly giving him goodies. Of course he's, worshiping you when every night is prom night.
Yeah.
Take away the goodies and see how he worships you then. And God kind of realizes that Satan's right. That by taking away all the good things God has bestowed upon him, he actually is giving Job the one thing he didn't have before, which was like the freedom to figure out what he really believes. It's he's not incentivized. He's not being bought off at that point. He's not being bribed by God. He's in a complete state of tabula rasa, and then he decides that he still loves God.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I heard an interview, we'll make this topical with the new Star Wars movie. I heard an interview with Harrison Ford once, and he was talking about, no celebrity that has any kind of integrity is going to complain about being a celebrity, right? So you're not going to be in an interview and be like, oh, it's so hard to be me. I have to do all these interviews and flying, around. But he was saying that the one thing that was difficult for him is that it's hard for him, unless he knew a person, unless he was friends with somebody before he became Harrison Ford, right? He never knows if he's friends with a person who's friends with him or friends with Han Solo and Indiana Jones. You know what I mean? That he never, when he meets a new person, it's almost impossible for him to determine if that person is interested in him or interested in the celebrity. and that it's hard for him to make new friends because of that, right? So this is a version of that same thing. Strip that away, and are you still interested in the person?
Yeah.
Or here's another version of that. When I got hired to be, when I started teaching, one of the things that is a job hazard, right, is, and this is a funny thing that just popped into my head, but this shows you where my brain is, I guess. One of the job hazards is getting hit on by students. Right, it doesn't happen a lot to me. Who knows why? But and by job hazard, I mean is sometimes we have young students that are 18, 19 years old, right? And they talk to you about this when you get hired, right? And you can date, if somebody's an adult, you can date a person who's a consenting adult, right? But when they're in your class, there's a
conflict of interest.
There's a conflict of interest, right? And almost always it's one of two things. They either have some kind of daddy professor fetish, or they're trying to get a good grade, right? And so they talk to you about this when they hire you, and they say, look, if you get a student who starts like throwing you vibe, it's not like part of the official training, but like other faculty will talk to you about it.
Do they realize how little good grades actually matter?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we should tell these people that. Yeah. You blew that guy?
You did what for a B-?
Nobody cares that you got a B in sociology.
It's Psych 101?
Yeah, for the kind of, for the degradation you had to go through.
Joke's on them.
Yeah, don't tell them. But the point is I had a colleague talk to me about this, a friend, and he was very blunt, and he said, you know what you're going to find when this happens to you? He says, tell the girl, if you're interested in it, right, if this is something you want to pursue, say, you know what, when the term ends and you're not in my class anymore, email me and like we'll go out for a drink or something, right? And he goes, and what you're going to find is 9 out of 10 times they won't. Because the thing was only in relationship to the power differential. Right. It was never an authentic relational connection.
Your mystique vanishes.
Yeah, and so I can understand God's point from Maimonides' point here. Like, when you take away all of the flash, is there anything of substance there, right? The other thing that I think is really fascinating.
You want to know this wasn't just a Tinder date.
Yeah. If Job was going to swipe left or swipe right, right? The other thing I find fascinating about that story is that, again, it was put to paper. The poetry in Job is some of the oldest written in the Bible, right? But the narrative was put in connection with that poetry during the Babylonian exile, right? And so here we have a group of people that were living in this covenant relationship with God, right? And it was a very kind of tactile covenant. The covenant was not about the afterlife. The covenant with God was, I will send you into that land, you will do this, 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 and this, and then I will bless you with long lives and with fruitful crops and with protection from your enemies, right? So it was a very tangible kind of contract. You do this and then you get this. But then they're carried off as slaves into Babylon. Right now, if you were somebody who violated the covenant, if you were a person who was living outside of the covenant bounds, well, then you're not wondering why you got carried up. Why didn't God protect me?
Right.
Well, because you weren't following the covenant, right? But what if you were following the covenant? What if you were a covenant observant Jew? It's not like the Babylonians came through and only took the people into slavery who weren't being good Jews. They took everybody into slavery, right? So here you are, a covenant-observing, Yahweh-worshiping Jew who just had everything you loved decimated and burned in front of your eyes, and you've been carried off into slavery to Babylon, which is where your people started 1,900 years before under Abraham, or 1,400 years before, whatever it was. And so a question might come up, what the fuck? Did this God abandon us? Was this all worth it? What's going on? I was doing everything I was supposed to. What's happening? You know what I mean? And so there were many Jews in the Babylonian exile who were exactly in Job's place. And they needed a book that said something to them, that said, yes, you've lost everything. Yes, you've suffered. Yes, right? This doesn't make sense and it might not seem fair. And however, at the end of that, your God has not abandoned you. Just walk through it, and there will be a restoration of some kind on the other side. And so I think there's merit to that as well. That in our darkest moments, we can't let go of the things that center us and that sustain us, because they will carry us through.
There's a a part in the Jewish Midrash, which is not in God is Disappointing You, but will be in my new book, Apocryphal Now. Where it's about the prophet Elijah, who's takes on like a student, and the student wants to understand the Torah, and of course Elijah's the best person to learn from.
Elijah the prophet.
Yeah, he's the king of the Torah. So Elijah says, "Okay, I'll take you under my wing, but you can't ask me any questions." And the guy's like,
Elijah's
"Okay."
being all zen.
yeah, he was super zen. So the guy's like, "All right." So they go to the house of this old couple, and the old couple are really nice to them. They take them. They're very poor, but they take them in. They feed them, and they give them what they have, and they let them sleep in the nice bed. And then in the morning, they go out to leave, and Elijah goes to their one little cow in the barn, and he slits its throat and kills it. and then they walk away, and the guy's thinking, okay, WTF? But Elijah doesn't explain himself. He just goes to like the next town, and there they stay with the rich man. And the rich man's very miserly. He doesn't even really talk to them very much. Tells them they have to sleep in the stable. Doesn't offer them anything to eat or drink. And then the next morning when they go to leave, Elijah notices the man's fence is broken, so he takes time to repair the rich man's fence for him. And then the next town, they come to like a synagogue, and the synagogue, the preacher doesn't know, or the rabbi doesn't know the Torah. He keeps making all these mistakes, and people are sleeping. And Elijah gets up and he blesses the congregation, and he says, "I hope someday this synagogue becomes the center of Torah understanding and learning in Israel." And then finally his students had enough. He's like, okay, you told me not to ask any questions, but I got to ask you, what's going on here? And then Elijah explains, well, the old couple who was really good to us, you did not know this, but they're scheduled by God to die the next day. So I sacrificed their cow to like ask God to extend their lives. And then the rich man, he didn't know this, but there was a treasure buried underneath his fence. So if I let him fix his own fence, he would have found it. But by fixing it, I prevented him from now he will live forever not knowing that there was this treasure buried underneath. And then if the synagogue ever becomes the center of learning and understanding, it will only be because the rabbi's been fired and these people have been shaken out of their stupor. And his point is like that the suffering is never without solace, and wickedness is never without punishment, and that is the Torah. And so the student finally understands the Torah, despite not asking any questions.
That's fascinating. So Apocryphal Now is the book.
Yeah.
I just had an idea. You should try to get Charlie Sheen to do the audiobook.
I got someone better.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, I got James Urbaniak, who does the voice of Dr. Venture.
Oh, nice.
The Venture Brothers.
No kidding.
Yeah, he did the audiobook for God is Disappointing You, and he's coming back for Apocryphal Now.
Oh, that's amazing. I was trying to make a joke, but you just...
Yeah, no, it's no joking matter.
With some serious stuff there. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, we're super happy.
Congratulations. That's cool. When is it coming out?
April.
That's
April
when the book
2016,
comes out?
yeah. And the audiobook will probably come out at the same time. We're doing a simultaneous release.
Oh, congratulations, man.
So
that story you just told me reminds me of an old... I have a proverb for you as well, right? It's a Chinese proverb. Have you heard this about the... stop me if you have, right? A donkey goes into a bar. It's a Chinese man. His horse runs away, right? And the stable's open, and the horse gets out and it runs away. And so the next morning it's gone, and the neighbor comes over, right? Oh my God, I'm so sorry, And the guy says, well, who knows, right? So a couple days goes by, and the guy gets up, and his horse is back. And not only is his horse back, but while it was out in the wilderness, it somehow teamed up with, found 6 or so other wild horses that followed it back. They followed this horse back. So this guy gets up, and his horse is back, and there's 6 other, like, fully, healthy, beautiful horses in his stable. So he gets up and closes the gate. Now he's got 7 horses, right? And so the neighbor comes over. Oh my God, congratulations, right? And the guy goes, well, who knows, right? So the next day, he's got his teenage son out, and they're trying to break these wild horses in, and the teenager's working with one of them and falls off of the horse or gets stepped on or whatever, and it breaks his leg, right? And so he's got a broken leg, and then the neighbor immediately, right? Oh my God, so sorry, so terrible. And the guy again, well, Who knows? And then the next day, the military comes through the town, and they're conscripting young people to be in the war that's coming, right? And they can't take this kid because he has the broken leg. And the story is meant to illustrate something very similar, which is that causation is something that we tend to oversimplify with our kind of limited brains, and that in the Hebraic sense, this idea is that God is watching these things, and these consequences, although maybe not seen to you and I, or there's an account being kept that will be satisfied. In the Chinese sense, it has more to do with the fact that causation is moving always in and out in multiple directions, and we're never able to really ascertain a line of reasoning that is pure, that we can say is purely good or purely bad. So it's got a slightly different mentality to it, but it's the same notion of careful judging things on their surface.
Yeah, we're always judging things with incomplete information.
Yeah.
And it's only good or bad based upon the information that we've accrued to judge it by.
Yeah.
It's sort of like evolution. We think the survival of the fittest, and organisms will gradually become. Species will gradually become stronger and better, but the adaptation is only good for this moment in time. If something radical were to change now, what was a great adaptation 1,000 years ago would become a terrible adaptation later. Like giraffes, the long neck, a great adaptation when you're trying to eat leaves off of tall trees. But say in 100 years all those trees died, and the temperature dropped 30 degrees in the sub-Saharan Africa, it'd be a terrible adaptation. Having to get circulation all the way up and down that long neck with the scarcity of resources, it would be a nightmare adaptation. So we can only judge things based upon the it's like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, based upon the moment and space that we're looking at it.
I think that's really fascinating. I want to move off the Bible stuff. We're about to go to break, but I want to say one more thing about it. Why do you think this kind of conversation isn't going on in the churches? This kind of nuanced theological discussion. Why isn't this more common in congregations around our country? Because I think most of this would be, I'm a former pastor, and I couldn't talk to most of my flock, if you will, back when I was a pastor this way. They just simply wouldn't be able to track.
Because I think most people aren't really believing or going to church because they're inspired by the profound mystery or by the wisdom in these books that they revere. They want to go because they want someone to tell them that they're not going to die. they want...
Yeah, that is true, man. I mean, yeah.
Well, it's like God is kind of a creation of the civilization that is, that is teaching about Him, and so people create God in a way, or they vision God in a way that they get what they need from Him.
Yeah.
And to the ancient Jews, who were trying to form a civilization in the middle of the wilderness, God was first and foremost a lawgiver. He was somebody who laid down, this is who we are and this is what we do. To the Christians who were living, under the Romans and daily persecution, God was a savior.
Yeah.
Somebody who was going to someday give the Romans their just desserts and was going to save you from persecution. And I think in a lot of ways to modern Americans,
until the Romans took over the message and co-opted it entirely.
But I think in a lot of ways to modern Americans, God's a Walmart.
Yeah.
He's somebody who gives you lots of stuff when you pray for it, and protects you from ever having to make any sacrifices or really experience anything other than a really completely soporific existence.
That's a really good point. God is a Walmart. Should we go to break on that one? Our producer thinks that's a good thing to go to break on. All right, the Walton family will be happy to hear that God is
I'm
a
sure
Walmart.
that'll be their next
and I think you're right. And I think it's a transactional method of spirituality that really just has more to do with conspicuous consumption of faith widgets than it does.
And it's not really unique to Christianity. I think every religion evolves according to the parallax that it needs to fill. I think that ISIS does the same thing with Islam in the Quran. They change it to suit their needs.
Jesus, you just said ISIS on my podcast. There's going to be guys with earpieces coming over here and give me anal probes and stuff.
You're on the FBI list now.
There goes my RSS feed again. Something strange is going to happen to it again as it gets diverted to Langley. All right, we're going to go to break, folks, and go anally probe ourselves. Mark Russell's going to get waterboarded, and then we'll be back right after these words.
Thank you for listening to On the Block. We'll be back in a moment.
Okay, so at some point, God decided that he wants kids. So he sweet-talked some 13-year-old girl into having his son. And perhaps even more impressively, he convinced her fiancé that this was totally cool. But God's timing was really rotten, because exactly 9 months after he knocked her up, Mary had to take this long-ass trip to Bethlehem to help her husband pay his taxes. And even though he let her ride the donkey, it's just impossible to get comfortable on those things. So it was a really rough trip. Then, to make matters worse, when they show up, the place is really bustling. Don't ask me why Bethlehem gets so busy during tax time. It just does. Anyway, the roads were super busy, donkey-to-donkey traffic, the hotels were full, and they didn't bring a tent or anything, but luckily one of the innkeepers let them stay in his barn. Just keep it down in there, he told them. So finally, Mary is able to lay down in some hay or whatever and give birth to Jesus, the Son of God. But that's all she got, just 1 minute of peace and fucking quiet before all these people started showing up. The angels, they can't keep a secret, so they spilled the beans to some shepherds, and now the barn is filled with cows and shepherds and animal shit and afterbirth. Totally unhygienic. Then out of nowhere, these 3 magicians show up with gifts. One of them has gold, which is sort of like a gift card in those days. And another one brings a perfume called frankincense. And the third one gives them myrrh, which is almost the same thing as frankincense. So not very imaginative gift givers. Then the hotel owner comes back and he sees his barn filled with shepherds and magicians and afterbirth. And he's like, hey, I said no parties. So even though it was a real pain in the ass for everyone concerned, they all decided to celebrate this day every year. And that's the story of the first Christmas.
Thank you for listening to On the Block. We talk to smart people so you don't have to.
All right, we're back, folks. Andy Gurbich here with Mark Russell. So Apocryphal Now is coming out in April, and you also have had some other things going on with DC Comics. Is that correct?
Yeah. In June 2015, I came out with the first issue of a comic book that I've been writing for DC called Prez, which is actually a reboot of a comic that ran for 4 issues in 1973 and 74. Amazing. That was written by Joe Simon, who created Captain America. It's about the country's first teenage president.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how was the comic received when it first? I mean, 4 issues, and so it didn't do well when it first came out?
No, it was terrible. When it first came out, like in the 70s, it was not very. It kind of came out, as around the time of Watergate and around after the 18-year-olds were given the vote, and so there was a lot of this sort of paranoia, like
people were like, "Whoa,
great! Now that we've given 18-year-olds the vote, we're going to have hippies in office." Hippies are going to be running the world in 4 years.
God forbid.
And of course it never panned out that way. But that's very much, I think, what the was the sort of the zeitgeist behind the original Prez. And mine is
that's because the hippies would always forget what day it was to vote.
Right.
Shit! Is it the 4th?
In my comic is much more about like how the world fell apart because the hippies never really took over.
Really?
Yeah. It's much more dystopian. It's set 20 years in the future in the year 2036.
Okay.
And my protagonist, my teenage president, Beth Ross, is elected via Twitter. The first American election that is allowed to happen by Twitter.
Wow.
She goes viral at just the right moment and ends up kind of like winning the election.
Fascinating. And then it kind of goes from there.
Yeah.
And how did you? I mean, so what you work? Where do you work? You work at PALS, right?
No, I work at Portland State.
At Portland State, that's right. And what do you do there?
I'm a manager of the student union building.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah. But you've been writing for a while, and then you got the idea to do the religious theme stuff. The God is disappointed in you, the Apocryphal Now. How did this even come up with DC? How does
They apparently
contact you?
They contact me. So if anyone's looking for advice on how to write for DC, this is really
just
bad.
Wait till they call you.
Yes, really bad advice. But I got really lucky. That was how I did it. Yeah, they. Some people over there were familiar with God is Disappointed in You, and so when they decided they wanted to do a reboot of this political comic they'd done in the 70s, they didn't really have anybody in their normal well of writers that would write like sort of a funny political comic book. I don't know if you're familiar with DC's brand, but it's very sort of brooding and dark, and a lot of
you get like Matt Fraction,
superheroes. Well, Matt Fraction would make more sense actually because he writes pretty funny stuff. They had no idea in DC who to ask about this. So, but somebody, my editor now, Marie Javins, was familiar with God is Disappointed in You, so she showed it to Dan DiDio, who's the publisher there, and so they called me up and asked me if I would be interested in writing. And of course, you just can't say no when you get a phone call like that.
Yeah. Did you think you were being punked or something at first, or
no?
Well, I've been waiting for you guys.
Yeah, I'd rather take a chance on being humiliated later than potentially lose the opportunity. So
because I would have immediately thought this was one of those Kenyan princes. You know what I mean? I know I would have been like, "Fuck you!" You're like,
there's a maxim in.
This is probably my roommate. I would have not believed it. Yeah.
There's a maxim in improv, not that I do improv, but there's a maxim in improv that's act as if.
Always say yes.
Whatever you're doing, act as if it's natural. Act as if this is completely expected to you. So when they called me up and asked me, I just acted as if, of course, I've been waiting for DC to call me and ask me to write a comic book.
It's funny. I've told this story before, but I heard J.J. Abrams telling a story in an interview about how Lost came about. And he said he was having dinner with the head of ABC, and the guy was complaining about how CBS was kicking their ass with Survivor, right? It was when Survivor was this juggernaut, and the guy was going, "Well, we just need a show about an island, you know. But I don't want to have another reality show on an island to go against them. We need like a drama, some kind of suspense, something sexy, you know, about an island. You got anything like that?" And he goes, "Oh God, I've been working on this thing. It's amazing that you would say that. I've been working on this show about an island, right?" And the guy goes, "Well, bring it in Monday," because, you know, Abrams realizes when the head of a network says to you, "Hey, do you have something on this?" You go, "Yeah, I got that."
Yeah, the worst thing you say is not really.
Yeah. He goes, "Yeah, I got that. I was just working on that." And the guy goes, "Great, bring it Monday." And then he goes home and he goes, "Fuck, I got to figure out a show about an island real quick," you know. And then he came up with the idea and kind of laid out the first season, you know, real rough, and then brought that in, and then they went from there. But you got to seize on those opportunities when they show up, man. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to take the opportunity to be embarrassed later.
Yeah, exactly. So you jumped on board.
Yeah, and it's worked out really well. We just finished publishing the 6th issue, and we're going to do another 6 issues in 2016.
Oh, that's excellent. And it did really well. I've been seeing you post that it's been making all these top 10, top 20 lists.
Yeah, it's been pretty critically acclaimed. I've made a bunch of lists, and the reviews have been really great. It was the top reviewed DC comic for like 3 months in a row.
Wow.
So,
do you wonder, like, God, did you see yourself writing comics? You know,
no,
5 years ago. I mean,
no, I didn't see myself writing comics 1 year ago. Yeah. It was weird because, you know, I get this call, and you know, and I hadn't even been thinking about writing DC. I hadn't been thinking about pitching anything as a comic book. And then I get this call, and within like 3 months, you know, I'm in LA at like the DC Talent Conference, like eating dinner surrounded by all the Batmobiles.
Wow.
I was like, I was in an alternate universe or something. It was like I never would have imagined I would be here. The day before I got the phone call. So
now one of the things I want to ask you about, and then, you know, I know the last thing you want to do is say anything negative about comic book fans, but have you been to a Comic-Con, a couple Comic-Cons?
Oh, now? Yeah. I've been going to Comic-Cons for years because God is disappointed he was published by Top Shelf.
Right.
Which is a comic book company.
Right. The animation is very, lends itself to that.
Yeah. So I'm very familiar with the Comic-Con world.
So now that you're writing for DC, I mean, do you get like stalked by guys that live in their parents' basement?
No,
I mean,
nobody cares.
DC, nobody.
No.
Do you charge?
Being a comic book writer is like the lowest sort of like grade of celebrity, I think.
Do you sit next to like Chekhov or Shatner and charge $50?
No, but sometimes you'll see him. Sometimes you can look at, you know, like see William Shatner's bald spot as he's getting ready to go on stage at a Comic-Con.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
those are huge. The one in San Diego, I mean, and the one in New York. I mean, if people don't know what they're like, it's unlike anything anyone.
Yeah, the one in New York
imagine.
had like 130,000 people.
Wow.
At once, you know, there it was nuts.
And what's amazing now is it's become this thing for all level of entertainment. You'll have like the Always Sunny in Philadelphia panel, and you go like, what does that have to do with comic books? Like now it's just kind of like entertainment.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, in a lot of ways, comics have kind of become the R&D arm of like movie studios. Like Marvel, it doesn't, and DC don't really call themselves. They don't call themselves DC Comics or Marvel Comics. They call themselves Entertainment. DC Entertainment, Marvel Entertainment. They're not comic book companies that sometimes make movies. They're movie companies that, you know, use comic books to research and develop like new ideas.
Yeah. We were talking before we started recording earlier, kind of about the arc you see superheroes going in comics, and I want to revisit that a little bit and talk about kind of what your thoughts on that, about where superhero movies are going and the whole kind of superhero genre. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like we are in an alarming superhero bubble, much like, you know, the real estate bubble of 2007.
Yeah.
Because I think that what happened was over the last 10 years when superhero movies really took off, and now all the biggest grossing movies, with the exception of Star Wars, obviously, are all superhero movies.
Right.
And I think what happened was, the CGI technology got so good that, it became really easy to make superhero movies and just have like 30-minute, CGI battles with like flying computer shrapnel all over the screen and guys flying around and buildings imploding. And it became easier to make these movies, and people were still kind of dazzled by the technology, the movie technology. So you didn't really have to have that great of a story.
Right.
And in fact, all the superhero movies made in the last 30 years kind of tell variations of the same stories.
Yeah.
Their stories are really very run-of-the-mill. In fact, they're not even really structured like stories anymore. They're structured more like video games. There's all these, there's just this like witty banter between sort of action set pieces and then subquests. It's very much structured like a video game. Then the whole point is just to like have the characters split up and fight these different foes and go on these little quests until they can all be brought back together at the end to fight the big boss at the end.
So they can level up.
Yeah. So they're really not very good storytelling for the most part. But people are still watching and going to them because of the flying CGI shrapnel. But now I think people that's been around long enough, people are used to that.
Yeah.
It's not really as exciting or as mind-boggling as it
So you'll
once
see
was.
something tank like that last Avengers movie or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, that did pretty good, but I think what they're trying to do now, they realize that the CGI is no longer enough, so they're trying to be a little edgier. They're just trying to like write the same crappy stories, but with better dialogue, wittier, banner, different slang. So then you get like Guardians of the Galaxy or Avengers 2, which are basically the same shitty superhero stories, but they're just like funnier characters,
kick ass, those kind of movies,
edgier, and so that's kind of kept it artificially fresh for a while longer. But pretty soon people will get sick of that, and eventually the bubble's going to burst. And when that happens, I mean, there's going to be like 3 Captain America movies that they've already spent like $100 million on, and they're not going to be able to sell these things anywhere. And it's going to be cataclysmic in the comic book world, I think.
Do you think that that's going to be a time when some of these smaller shops can start putting forth their narratives, Dark Horse and others? Like there are other comic book companies with other worlds and other kinds of structures that exist. They've just never been able, and people that are super into it know about these things, but they haven't broken into mainstream.
I think it'll be cataclysmic for the big two. I think it'll be cataclysmic in the same way that like a comet hitting the Earth was cataclysmic for the dinosaurs. Yeah, it's going to wipe out the dinosaurs, but the rats and mice living under the brambles will have a chance to evolve and become take over the landscape. The rats and mice in this case being Dark Horse and like Oni, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but they will the smaller, more independent, like non-superhero related comics will get a chance to sort of like be read by a wider audience. I would say that the superhero as an archetype, as a thing, is really something that served this country from the 30s really until the 1980s, and then since then we've been doing these artificial bubbles through various kinds of technology and creating these flashy things that keep the thing propped up, but that it hasn't really been relevant as something that spoke to Americans. Right, but that 50-year period was something that was just where people were ready for that kind of ideology. Well, and for like so long, for most of their history, from like the creation of Superman, until like maybe the 90s, superheroes were kind of the provenance of children. It was kind of children's power fantasies. But because the audience was primarily children, it didn't have to be original. I mean, you could tell the same stories because they were new to the kids. Right. They didn't know any better. But now it seems like everybody's going to like the superhero movies or like 40-year-old dudes, like collectors, and so they've seen it like 30 times already. By the time now they need something fresh. Exactly. So that's your primary audience now for superheroes. And
what do you think about a superhero show like Jessica Jones. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I liked Jessica Jones a lot. I thought, I actually started watching it thinking, I'm going to use this as like to add ammunition to my idea that superhero movies are now, or superhero related stuff, where this fin to sickle, where it's all they're just reproducing garbage.
Right.
But it actually turned out to be really good. It surprised me, and I think the reason why it surprised me because it's so unsuperhero like.
It's unsuperhero like, yeah.
Yeah, it's more about a normal person who happens to like have superheroes, and they're very limited. They're very well defined. They're actually in somebody who experiences mortal peril, and you believe it when she's in danger.
She can get her ass kicked. Yeah,
and she's had she's been victimized in very real ways despite her powers. So yeah, it's a much more fascinating, I think, approach to and maybe this is how they get out of that bubble, is by just begin sort of like slowly de-escalating the superhero arms race and making more human films that involve superheroes.
What about the Heroes reboot? Have you checked that out?
I didn't watch the original. I don't really care about the follow-up.
It's something I tried to get into both times and wasn't able to other times.
I think I watched one episode of the original series and just wasn't that into it.
What did Billy Eichner say about Game of Thrones? I want to be okay with it. I'm just not. That's cool. So what's next for you? As far as, so you got another season, is it called a season? What is it? Another run of Prez?
Yeah, another volume. I signed up to do two 6-issue volumes of Prez. And Volume 1 is done, and Volume 2, which will be another 6 issues, comes out in 2016.
That's cool. So it's Game of Thrones, Veep, and Prez, right? Those are the three things people need.
Oh, yeah. Not necessarily in that order. No.
Or not Game of Thrones, House of Cards. Sorry, House of Cards is what I was trying. I was just the Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones is probably more relevant to American politics than it was a year ago.
Yeah, if Trump is the front runner, how much worse could a teenage girl be?
Yeah, no, that's kind of my point too. Is that that what we really need is somebody who can break away from these power bases that kind of control American politics and just be a sort of a free agent.
That's what people want with Bernie Sanders, and we don't talk about a lot of relevant things on the show. I hope you realize that. No, but a lot of I try to steer the show away from talking about politics or talking about things that are in the news or the headlines, but just since your comic book is
irrelevance is a form of freedom.
Yeah, exactly. I try not to have I want the show to be more evergreen. But since your comic book is about this issue, I have to ask you a little bit in our final minutes here about one of the things I love that you do is you're a troublemaker on the Twitterverse with people like Donald Trump and Ben Carson and others. You're always kind of mixing it up with these people.
Yeah, it's kind of like just a hobby of mine.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes just too good to pass up because
have you ever gotten a bite back from one of them?
Yeah, well, I actually get in a little sort of Twitter arguments with Grover Norquist of all people sometimes, like the no new taxes pledge guy.
Yeah, the guy who said he wanted to make government so small we can drown it in a bathtub.
Yeah, right. Or put it in the pocket of a major Fortune 500 corporation.
The other thing he said is we want a president that's smart enough to sign the pieces of legislation that I put in front of him, and that's it.
Yeah,
he's a real class act, that guy.
My feeling about Grover Norquist is if that is the Grover Norquist pledge had been around during World War II, we would have lost.
Yeah. That's a good point.
It's like it can only possible work in these really optimal times. And anytime the nation has a crisis like a depression or a war or something like that, his pledge is utterly suicidal. And I think his pledge, even in optimal times, is really more about turning America slowly into a third world country than it is about protecting people's hard-earned wealth, because almost all the money that is saved from staying on this pledge comes at the expense of infrastructure and social safety nets and the things that most of us use and rely upon to retire or to send our kids to school. And almost all the benefits from not paying for those things go to the people who are using it are shipping their money offshore to banks in Bermuda or blowing it on hookers and cocaine or hedge fund managers. He's really the best friend the hooker and cocaine industry has ever had.
Yeah, no kidding. Did you see that story a few years ago that came out about all of the oil company executives that were doing blow and like the hookers and the crazy scenes that were going on? Do you remember that? It was a whole corruption deal with.
I remember Fox News doing a piece once on like auto workers, like union auto workers, and what they do on their lunch breaks. And they would just go and film them, and they'd be like, just sitting in their pickup trucks drinking beer. And it's like, that guy's drinking a beer. He's not supposed to be drinking. and it's like, if you were to like take that camera and like to like an executive boardroom right now, or better yet, like some corporate retreat in Vegas,
exactly,
where they've got like the penthouse in the stratosphere, and film what was going on in there.
Yeah, exactly. And they're doing vodka enemas and shit. Yeah,
right. Exactly. It's not. They're not up there. They're not sitting in a pickup drinking a beer out of a paper bag. I guarantee you.
Tried working that shit job for 35 years.
Yeah.
So, in our final few minutes here, what are you trying to say with Prez? I mean, you said it a second ago. Like, American politics needs, on the national level, somebody that can step away from these concentrated, corruption.
Well, I think the big criticism, the underlying criticism with Prez is not really even political so much as it's social. It's that the biggest problem in the world is our waste of human resources.
Yeah.
It's that the fact that we've got 7 billion of the smartest, most creative, problem-solving computers in the known universe in the form of the human brain. And most of them are picking beans or asking you if you want fries with your shake.
Yeah.
We have locked
being sex trafficked.
We've locked in most of the problem-solving capabilities that are really what we need to unlock if we're ever going to survive the 21st century and the challenges of global warming and deforestation and resource depletion. These are major problems. The loss of fresh water in the world these are problems that are probably going to make it incapable for the human race surviving the 21st century at the level where we are at now.
Sure.
7 billion people are not going to make it out of the 21st century alive unless we solve these very fundamental problems. And if we have to lower the human population down to a level that can match our available resources, that's going to be massive wars or genocides or diseases. And if we're going to avoid that fate, it's going to take the entire problem-solving capacity of the human race. And we can't afford having 5 billion people
on the sidelines
picking weeds. And that's kind of, I think, my underlying thing is that we need to begin seriously unlocking the
spending human capital a little more
capacity
wisely,
of the human mind, and every human mind has that capacity.
I love the idea, right before we end here, of you, because of the nature of what the comic does, factoring young folks into that equation as well. I love it when I see. What I don't like is the meme that many people have of hating young people. You know what I mean? These kids today are so irresponsible. In my day, we wore our pants up higher and we wore our hair this way. This notion that every young person is just this lazy asshole that's completely clueless.
No, I work at a university. I know better. It's like there's so many smart, hardworking people. What they lack really are the opportunities that the boomers had. It's like, well, I got to college when I was 24 in 1975, and I went right to like a middle class job. Exactly. I don't know why you can't do that.
Yeah, right.
You bums.
It doesn't exist anymore. Yes. That's why.
You mean you can't buy a house by the time you're 24? What's wrong with you?
Right. I bought my house for $18,000. It's
because they came out of school without any student debt, and there's lots of like good paying jobs and a great social safety net at that time. They've benefited from like the best sort of social safety net, the best sort of social program in American history. They pulled the ladder up behind them, and they're complaining about why the millennials are stuck on the ground.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say about that is every time I turn around, I'm seeing another story about a 19-year-old that invented some machine that can pull plastic out of the Pacific Ocean than is solar powered.
There's an immense amount of creativity.
Or a 16-year-old that invented a $27 test for certain kinds of cancer, or you know what I mean? Like there's all of this innovation happening.
Well, I think in a lot of ways
people.
they've given up on like waiting for these opportunities. They've given up on waiting for like, you know, the ability to like go into the workplace. So they've been forced to like create their own opportunities, which in a lot of ways has worked out well. But for a lot of people, it's been, you know,
a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's fascinating. Well, hey, man, thanks for talking with us. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
It was my pleasure.
Where can people follow what you're doing?
Well, if you follow me on Twitter, I will update you with everything I do in my life.
Okay.
Every hour of the day. At
and what's
Manruss,
coming out and when?
Yeah, at Manruss, MANRUSS on Twitter.
Okay.
And also, you could just... that's probably the best way.
And they can get God is Disappointed in You
Google
at any
Mark
bookstore.
Russell in Prez, or Mark Russell, God is Disappointed in You. Yeah, and God is Disappointed, or Apocryphal Now, the new book will be out in April 2016.
Do you get a lot of hate mail and stuff from extremely religious people?
You know, the quality and quantity of the death threats has been extremely disappointing.
You're hoping for more, huh?
Yeah, no, hardly any. I've gotten a lot of great like emails and tweets and stuff from people who really love the book.
Yeah.
Very little from people who didn't like it. I actually, will Google reviews of the book when it comes out. And every now and then there's like one sort of like poorly spelled review on a religious website.
I wrote that.
Yeah, that just kind of denounces it, you know, like calls for a fatwa against the book.
Down with this sort of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's hard to take seriously, you know, and the response has been so overwhelmingly positive. I've actually been very blown away by how well it's been received.
Have you taken it to any churches?
Yeah, I did my presentation at the First Christian Church in Portland, and they're super cool, and they really liked it, and really good people. And I've been invited to go to other churches. We sold a copy when we were at Comic-Con to like a nun. Who said she was going to use it to teach her religion in her class, and
was it an actual nun? Because at Comic-Con you can't tell.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it could have been
a costume. 40s.
Yeah, she
dressed up as.
It was some cosplay at work.
Yeah, exactly.
No, she wasn't in.
Could have been a bromie.
She wasn't in her nun habit. She just told us she was.
Oh, okay,
so,
that's cool.
Who knows?
Right.
But
I was going to use it in her class. That's cool.
Yeah, and I was doing my panel at the San Diego Comic-Con for God is Disappointed in You, and the last guy. We did their Q&A session. The last guy to raise his hand said, "I'm a Southern Baptist minister," and I'm like, "Oh no."
Here we go. Yeah.
And he said, "I just wanted to say that I really love this book because this book is at least getting people talking about the Bible."
Yeah, there you go. It's fascinating. That's cool. Because that doesn't happen enough, at least on that level. I mean, I think people talk about it a lot, but I don't think they talk about it with this level of sophistication and accessibility, which I think is the combination that I think really makes it awesome.
Well, I thank you very much.
All right, folks. God is Disappointed in You, Apocrypha Now, and the Prez series coming at you from Mark Russell. I appreciate you being here, man. I really do.
Thanks.
And we will see you on the other side. Go look you up at Mark Russ.
At Manruss. At Manruss on Twitter.
There's some guy named at Mark Russ right now that's stoked. He's getting all these free follows. Don't follow that other guy. He's a douchebag. Go at
he doesn't deserve
Russ.
it.
Yeah, he's done nothing cool. All right, we'll see you on the other side, folks.
You've been listening to On the Block with Andrew Gurovich. The show is produced in Portland, Oregon by Michael DiNapoli at MD Productions. Theme music by Cat Power. Closing music by Jonathan Oak. Look us up on the web at ontheblockradio.com, where you can also link to us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to tune in next week for a brand new episode. Previous episodes can be found on our website. Thanks for listening.
Oh, you're beautiful kitty kitties. Oh, look at you out there. Beauty like a bolt of light in a darkened hallway. New minds looking at this world, at our lives, with the perspective of apocalypse children. Standing dusty in the barren highways, standing broken before the fathers who were meant to make us whole, but who only lied to us about what it meant to be a man, about what it meant to be a woman, about what it meant to be a child of this doomed age.